The government this week announced new powers for the police to stop what it calls intimidating protests near places of worship, synagogues, mosques, churches, and other religious sites, and places of worship. I hate the term places of worship. It's one of those vague things which is wheeled out in religious education. Not all religious events are events centered around worship. Funerals are not an act of worship per se, and so on. The certainly individuals should not feel threatened or unable to attend their religious centres. And at first glance, it seems reasonable and compassionate. We've all seen the heartbreaking stories: Muslim attack targeted during unrest in areas like Southport and Hull. Jewish communities unable to attend Shabbos services because of disturbances in the area related to concerns about Gaza. It's supported by hate crime statistics, which show a 13% rise in Islamophobic hate crimes and a 113% increase in anti-Semitic events over the last year. And the risks are real and the atmosphere is feverish. But despite its good intentions, the proposed legislation, or the legislation which is now being put out, is rife with ambiguity. It adds a subjective and possibly unmanageable threshold, which is the impact of a protest. What is the impact of a protest that might intimidate worshippers? And this relies on sections 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act of 1986, which already grant police the authority to prohibit or disruptive or intimidating rallies. So what I'm not really sure of is what extra options are now given to the police, if it's already there. I think there are various issues which haven't been thrashed out. The first one is what actually constitutes intimidation: noise, banners, police horses in the wrong places. Is chanting "ceasefire now" outside a synagogue intimidation or political expression? If a congregation simply feels intimidated, regardless of the conduct of the protesters, can that feeling become the basis for the legal suppression of the protest? And there I think we're in a very dangerous position. It's not simply an academic ambiguity. The police are being forced to evaluate protest rights against religious feelings in the course of their decision making, looking at proportionality, looking at emotionally charged events, weighing protest rights against the feelings of individuals and the within the vicinity of a building. But the new power to alter the timing and the route of a protest, to change the date, the time, the path, supposedly to avoid causing a religious offence. How is a regional police force supposed to keep track of every religious event in a multicultural city, or at every place of worship, or every holy day, and then patrol the area appropriately? This isn't law. This is legislative mood music, an attempt to make the government sound tough on hate, while outsourcing all judgment to the front line of the police. And then there's the issue of this selective symbolism, the new offence of climbing on war memorials, including the forthcoming Holocaust memorial near Parliament. This sounds reasonable, but we have to ask, are these symbolic laws actually addressing the threats they name, or are they simply bait for headlines, red meat for cultural warriors? Is it actually an invitation rather than a prevention. Climbing on the Holocaust Memorial will now be punishable by imprisonment. One wonders how many actual climbers there have been, or there will be, or whether this is simply a solution in search of a photo op. It's provocative law. It's a law to invite people to disobey. I want to be very clear here. Communities must not live in fear, and places, religious locations, religious sites must be safeguarded. However, the means to do so are already in place. Better advice is the solution if police officers are unsure of their authority, not the creation of new legislation with wording so ambiguous that it becomes politically and legally embarrassing or an opportunity for manipulation. In reality, ambiguous public order regulations frequently have the opposite effect to what was intended. They result in overreach, legal challenges, and a decline in public confidence in what the police can actually do and in law enforcement in general. Laws intended to provide balance, as seen by the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act, frequently wind up being used to suppress genuine opposition. They frequently end up in some form of dictatorial power. And that cannot be right. We shouldn't be suppressing opposition or the voice of opposition simply to cling to convenient authority. Ultimately, I think this is a failure to think through the real problem. Faith communities are under strain, and the Home Secretary's £50 million security fund for religious sites is a worthy start. But combining real security measures with half-baked legal thresholds muddles the picture. What is needed is not an illusion. This illusory comfort of total clarity is not what's required. This law doesn't offer security. It offers a muddle. And targeted policing, community outreach, community dialogue, proper protest management, and above all, the political courage to treat hate crime seriously, not symbolically. This is what is needed. And that's already allowed for in current legislation anyway. We don't need new laws. We simply need to enforce the laws that already exist. It's another example of the government trying to legislate for feeling rather than for fact. And in this, in law, woolliness is not compassion. It's confusion. And in this case, confusion wrapped in virtue signaling. And we need to avoid that sort of chaos and misappropriation of language and of ideas. And I think in the end we need to get back to asking, how do we teach? How do we teach about religion in schools and in universities and in the community? Because it's that absence of solid, structural and respectful thought that causes so much of the problem that is now being targeted by silly and ill-considered laws. And how do you know they're ill-considered? How do you know they're silly? Because they've got the word worship in them. They've got the word worship in them. And that is not always appropriate in a religious context. And once you take that out, then you know you're dealing with somebody who's actually got who's actually got some sort of understanding of the multiplicity of religious expression. At the moment, we're locked in some sort of patronising avoidance of responsibility.